Chapter 1503 A Phoenix Appears. Chapter 1503 A Phoenix Appears. This was a barren galaxy, and was billions and billions of miles away from the nearest star. Even with the cloud-piercing shuttle, they had to travel 10 to 15 days. Ling Han stood in the galaxy. It was empty all around him. What about the treasure trove? What treasure existed in this place? Did you remember wrong? Empress Luan Xing asked. Ling Han shook his head. Impossible. With his memory, how could he possibly remember the wrong coordinates? Hold on. He suddenly started. There is also a spell, but I could not recognize it at all in the beginning, and thought it was mere nonsense. If a saint passed on his teachings, and talked about the regulations of heaven and earth, would a shattering void tear be able to understand? It was practically preaching to deaf ears. Ling Han had also been the same at first. He'd thought that this spell was just mere nonsense, and could not identify any kind of significance in them at all. He tried his best to remember while muttering strange sounds with his mouth. An po, luo, ci. Yi. Empress Luan Xing froze. My body actually has some kind of reaction to these words. Ling Han stopped. What kind of reaction? I don't know, either, but it seems like a kind of feeling that I should know these words. Empress Luan Xing suddenly stopped, and exchanged a look with Ling Han. Celestial words, both exclaimed at the same time. That should be the case. Empress Luan Xing was a member of an ancient divine tribe, and her ancestors had been exiled from the celestial realm. However, the bloodline had been passed on through the generations, so when she heard celestial words, it was possible that her bloodline would react. Fuck, it can't be that I guessed correctly. Ling Han was struck speechless. The trip this time was primarily to lay a trap for Jiyu Daoyi. Ling Han had already grasped a considerable number of celestial techniques, and had the Black Tower in his possession, so he was not all that greedy about the so-called mystery realms of the immortal realm. Thus, though he had long since known of the existence of this mystery realm, he had not acted all this while. To lure Jiyu Daoyi out, he had even wanted to fake this place as a celestial-level mystery realm. This was not strange. The celestial realm had expelled who knew how many people all those eons ago, so what would be strange about them leaving behind a few celestial-level mystery realms in the immortal realm? A celestial-level treasure trove. Jiyu Daoyi should be slightly tempted, right? He had never imagined that it was actually possible that this place really was connected to the celestial realm. Continue reciting, the Empress said. Ling Han nodded, and tried hard to remember. With his memory, even if he had merely taken a cursory glance at the time, he would still be able to slowly remember. Mo lo jiefei yi, shimiao yu. He continued reciting. Though it was merely a single spell, it was actually a very, very long recitation. Mysteriously and inexorably, a wave that even a saint would not be able to capture surged out in the universe. But precisely because it could not be captured, Ling Han did not sense any change had taken place even after he had finished reciting. I thought that a door or a passage would appear when I finished reciting. Ling Han scratched his head, slightly disappointed. Or space would be ripped apart and a mystery realm would appear, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden continued. The Empress asked, is it possible that you remembered some word wrong? Impossible. Ling Han shook his head. He had that much confidence in himself. The Empress naturally would not doubt Ling Han. She pondered for a moment, and then said, then why don't we stay here and observe for a while? Additionally, you can recite a few more times. All right. Ling Han nodded, and repeated the spell a few more times. Furthermore, he even used his origin power, and it spread out like waves in the universe. But there was still not the slightest bit of change. Let's wait 3 days. All right. They patiently waited 3 days, but still nothing changed at all. Ling Han. Let's wait for another 3 days, he said again after some thought. All right. The Empress and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden would not have any disagreement, of course. Another 3 days had passed, and still there was no change at all. Last 3 days. Ling Han gritted his teeth. Waiting, and soon a month had passed. Every time Ling Han and his companions planned to leave after waiting 3 days, they feared that a miracle would happen in the next instant, so they waited 3 days and another 3 days and so on. This time, it really is the last 3 days, Ling Han assured, irritated as well. Fine. The Empress kept smiling, though. She would not refuse any request from Ling Han. Could it be that the treasure has already been taken by someone else? The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden asked doubtfully. It should not be. Ling Han hummed lightly. The Tool Spirit in the 12 Palaces had once said very clearly that though someone had also previously obtained these galactic coordinates, they had died in the end. Furthermore, the authority controlling the lower realm at the time was the 5 sects. If the 5 sects had obtained these galactic coordinates, Ling Han did not believe that they had the ability to open up this mystery realm. Whether they were able to even come here was unknown. Yi. Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing paused at the same time. With the senses of eternal river tear that they had already discovered something unusual. What is it? Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden asked. Ling Han and the Empress were both looking at a specific corner of the galaxy, and then stretched out a finger to point in that direction. There. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden gazed as far into the distance as she could, and still could not see anything. However, she knew that Ling Han and the Empress would definitely not deceive her, so she continued to look. The fact that she could not see should be because her vision and other senses were still not adequate. At last, after a few breaths' time, she saw that a spot of light had appeared there, and it was rapidly enlarging. Ling Han and the Empress inhaled sharply. What had they seen? In the darkness of the galaxy, there were 3 phoenixes flapping their wings in flight. Each phoenix was larger than a mountain, and though they were flying side by side, the length of their spread-out wings was close to 10,000 miles because there was also a gap of 10,000 miles between each phoenix. They had not flown close enough, and there was already an indescribably massive pressure exerted on them. That was saintly might. True phoenix, an existence on the level of a true phoenix, well known among all the divine beasts. Ling Han and his companions were all tremendously astonished. Was it just mere confidence that they had encountered 3 true phoenixes? With how big the universe was, this possibility was close to 0%. Once something was too coincidental, it was possible that it was no coincidence. That spell. It was not meant to open up a treasure trove, but a summoning for 3 true phoenixes. Furthermore, they had been who knew how far away previously, and thus they had only arrived after over 30 days had passed. Saints could traverse the galaxy, and their speed was definitely faster than the cloud-piercing shuttle, yet even they had to fly 30+ days, so how far away had they been previously? A spell had summoned 3 true phoenixes. What kind of concept was that? Even Ling Han and his companions were a little stunned. Boom. Suddenly, 2 wings spread out from the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's back. They were 30,000 meters long, but compared with those 3 true phoenixes, the gap was not just a little big. Even if her wings were 30,000 meters long, so what? She was still on the smaller side. This appearance was a little grand. Though the Star Sand Saint had never appeared, Ling Han had sensed his aura a few times, and could very surely confirm that this great saint was inferior to those 3 true phoenixes. Saint King level, the strongest of the immortal realm. Even Ling Han felt a little weak. He stretched out both hands and grabbed onto the wrists of Empress Luan Xing and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, respectively, so they could enter into the Black Tower at any time. How fast were Saint Kings? Every time the true phoenix flapped their wings, they would be able to toss endless space behind them. It was only a matter of a few blinks of the eye, and they had already arrived in front of them. Ling Han and his companions gaped at the same time, even more shocked than when they had first spotted the 3 true phoenixes. Chapter 1504, Treasure Chest. Chapter 1504, Treasure Chest. The 3 true phoenixes were actually pulling a chariot behind them, and on the chariot, aside from a chest, there was nothing else. What stunned Ling Han and his companions even further was not just that, but also that these 3 true phoenixes had already passed on. These were 3 phoenixes that had died who knew how long ago, but Saint Kings were immortal. They still maintained their appearance from when they were alive. However, there was not the slightest bit of life to them any longer. It was merely because phoenixes were elementally aligned with fire that innumerable divine flames were burning on their wings. So bizarre. 3 true phoenixes were pulling a chariot, and it was unknown how many years they had been dead for. Who could make 3 Saint King-level true phoenixes pull a chariot? What astonishing wealth! This is the treasure trove of the heavenly river king? Linghan looked at it, and involuntarily hissed. This was really too easily obtained, wasn't it? It was not suitable as a trap for Jiyu Daoyi. The 3 true phoenixes had already stopped, and curbed their wings as if they were sleeping. Meanwhile, there was still endless divine flame burning on their bodies. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden involuntarily revealed a vacant expression, and she walked forwards. Linghan quickly pulled her back, and said, "Don't be rash." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden paused, and her eyes became clear. She said, "I feel as if these 3 true phoenixes are summoning me." Linghan thought for a moment. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden possessed the cloud phoenix bloodline, and the cloud phoenix was a branch off of the true phoenixes. Whatever reason there was for the death of these 3 old phoenixes, their bones, physical bodies, and blood were all invaluable precious treasures. An ordinary person could not possibly obtain them, because they would not be able to hold up to such pressure. However, if they were the ones summoning her, it was possible that the heavenly phoenix divine maiden would obtain a massive good fortune. After some thought, Linghan released his hold, and said, "Be careful. If there is any danger, absolutely don't force yourself." "I understand." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden walked forwards. Her wings spread out on their own, exuding the power of the bloodline of the cloud phoenix. The 3 phoenix corpses unfolded their wings at the same time, wrapping around the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Then, silence fell, and there was not the slightest bit of sound. Linghan could no longer sense the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. No matter how powerful he was, he could not possibly penetrate the barrier set up by the divine sense of a saint. There should be no problem. If the Saint King wanted to kill someone, what need was there to go through so much trouble? A single thought would be enough. Even if the 3 old phoenixes had long died, their might was still existent. A single thought could still easily kill a small saint or a medium saint, and even a great saint would not dare come too close. This was a great fated opportunity for the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and perhaps would allow her to be reborn. Linghan broke into a grin. The horn of the true dragon was settled, and now it looked like the feather of the heavenly phoenix was obtainable as well. Those were 3 Saint King-level true phoenixes, simply plucking one of their feathers would be enough. "What's in the chest?" Empress Luan Xing was very curious. "Let's open it and take a look." Linghan climbed up the chariot. This was an extremely ancient item. There were holes everywhere on the armrests of both sides, and they had all been blasted out by supreme god tools, murderous aura bubbling from them. Linghan did not dare touch them, and carefully avoided them. He wanted to draw this chest into the Black Tower. Then, no matter what danger it posed, the Black Tower would be able to suppress it. But the problem was that this chest seemed to have been glued to the chariot, and the chariot was being pulled by 3 true phoenixes. If he wanted to take it in, he would have to take in the 3 true phoenixes as well. This was an impossible feat. Though the 3 true phoenixes had long since died, they still had an obsession that could not be dispersed. Otherwise, they could not possibly travel through the universe, and fly over when they sensed they were being summoned by the spell. Unless Linghan's will was stronger than even these 3 true phoenixes, and could take them in by force. And this obviously was impossible. Linghan turned around, and told Empress Luan Xing, "I'll open the chest, step back a bit." This time, the Empress did not obey. Instead, she drew out the brick. "You open it. If any attack blasts out, I will block it." With the brick in hand, the world was hers. Linghan saw her expression was filled with determination, and nodded. With the Empress buying time by blocking, he could take the 2 of them into the Black Tower if there was any danger. He lowered his body, and went to open the chest. The chest could not be easily moved, but it was comparably much easier to open the chest. So heavy. Linghan gritted his teeth. He felt that the chest lid was slightly loosened, but its weight was even more frightening than 100,000 mountains. It was practically as heavy as a whole planet. With a burst of all his power, origin power, and stamina, the chest lid was finally lifted just that slight bit. And that was just him. Otherwise, if it had been another person, It was impossible even if they had such power. They would only tear off their own hands. It was too heavy. The chest opened a slight bit, and majestic light flickered as if an astonishing rare treasure was about to appear. Ah! Ling Han released a large shout, used all his power, and raised the chest lid a bit more. At this moment, he suddenly felt the pressure ease in his hands. The chest was actually opening on its own. Ling Han took a step back, and stood beside Empress Luanxing. Meanwhile, the Empress had raised the brick high, and was careful and vigilant. Wang, the chest was open, and a streak of majestic light shot into the skies as if an exceptional divine treasure was being unveiled. After a very long while, this majestic light finally gradually faded, but there was still light rippling in the chest, though it was not as blazingly bright as it had once been. Ling Han and the Empress both involuntarily took a step forward, wanting to take a closer look. They were really much too curious. Yi, they exclaimed in surprise. That was because it was not some kind of treasure that the chest contained, but rather a scene of chaos. They could not see through it at all. What the hell was that? Every flower means a world of its own. Could this chest also be a chest of its own? Ling Han wore a strange expression. The treasure left behind by the Heavenly River King had actually appeared in this manner. Let's go in and take a look. Empress Luanxing asked Ling Han's opinion. All right. Ling Han nodded. He was an extremely curious person in the first place. Since things had progressed so far, there was naturally no reason for him to shrink back now. It was necessary to take due caution. Ling Han summoned a demonic beast from within the Black Tower, and threw it over at the treasure chest. This was a wild bull. Its tail touched the chest first, and it was immediately sucked in like a ball made of mud dropped into the sea. In the process of being sucked in, though it was still struggling, it did not appear to have been wounded. It just could not manage to struggle free. Very soon, this wild bull had disappeared. Ling Han threw over a tiger, a wolf, and so on. Ling Han dragged out the Azura Demon Emperor as well. Immediately, the latter's face paled in fear, fearing that Ling Han would really throw him over while he was at it. He hurriedly shouted, "Master, I am the little Azura, don't throw me in too." Cowardly and fearing death was his true character, which he was no longer embarrassed about. Ling Han chuckled. After trying so many times, he was 99% sure that the process of entering into this treasure chest, at least, was not dangerous. As for what lay within, he had no idea. Let's go in and take a look. He shot out a kick with his foot, and the Azura Demon Emperor suddenly fell in. Then, Ling Han pulled the Empress and they both jumped into the chest. Wang, being tugged by an unidentified force, Ling Han and his companions arrived at the foot of a mountain. Ahead of them was a huge mountain, but a massive paw was pressing down on the mountain top. It had been snapped, and was still bleeding as if it had just happened yesterday. And in the outside world, a starship was closing in at an extraordinarily rapid pace. Suddenly, it stopped, and 7 people leaped out from within. Chapter 1505, Gone Crazy from Poverty. 1505 Gone Crazy from Poverty. These 7 people were all exuberant young people, consisting of 4 men and 3 women. The men were handsome and the women were beautiful, all exuding the aura unique to King Tears. Ancestors' deductions were indeed correct. There would be a great good fortune appearing here, a young man said. Naturally, ancestors' fortune-telling skills are equal to none. What rare treasure is this? I don't know, but since Ancestor had us make a trip here, it must be nothing ordinary. These are 3 true phoenixes, heavens. Using 3 true phoenixes as horsepower, what exorbitant wealth. This kind of secret trove must be extraordinary. Why has the chest been opened? It's all right. Ancestor has said that the good fortune lies within the chest, and even if someone made it here first, with the combined forces of the 7 of us, could there be anyone beneath saint level we can't deal with? I fear that it is the action of a saint. Impossible, Ancestor has already concealed the twists of fate. Even if the treasure appeared, it would not draw the attention of saints. It should have been someone who just coincidentally happened to arrive here. Ian, just set it aside. Let us immediately go in. But the bodies of these 3 true phoenixes outside. Don't think about it. The body of a saint king is not something that we can covet. Though Ancestor has predicted that a rare treasure will appear this time, he has still miscalculated. If he had known that there would be 3 true phoenixes, Ancestor would have probably moved out personally. That's right. Though the secret trove of a saint king is paltry to us, with our background, it is still considerably valuable. No. I suddenly remembered. With 3 phoenix kings as his mount, this is the secret trove of the legendary Heavenly River King. What? That person who our forbidden lands joined forces to attack, is said to be connected with the celestial realm. This time Ancestor has really miscalculated. If this is the secret trove of the Heavenly River King, then not just Ancestor, but even those big shots on the same level as Ancestor would be tempted. What are we going to do? The treasure is right in front of us, so how could we just let it pass us by? Though Ancestor has hidden the twists of fate, the time is still limited. That's right. Let us first obtain the rare treasure. All 7 of them were incredibly excited. This was actually the legendary treasure that the Heavenly River King had left behind. It could be claimed to be one of the most valuable treasures of the entire immortal realm. Every true big shot would definitely be tempted. They entered into the chest one after another. They did not have to be as careful as Ling Han and his group and send out cautious probes, because they had received personal instruction from a mighty figure of their clan, and knew that there was no danger. Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing did not know that a few visitors had arrived. In their opinion, with how big the universe was, even 3 Phoenix Kings were comparably insignificant in size, so the chances of a starship passing by encountering them should be 0. They looked at the mountain top. That massive paw should belong to some kind of demonic beast, and it had been snapped off at the wrist. It was still seeping blood, which was extremely thick, and was reflecting light like bright red rubies. There was actually an exceptional beauty to it. Even if it was just a broken paw, it still gave others a suffocating feeling. One could completely imagine how powerful the owner of this paw was. It was said that the Heavenly River King had died from a combined attack from a great many powerful enemies, and that had to have been the very strongest group of the entire immortal realm. Just looking at the 3 dead true phoenixes outside, they knew how astonishingly powerful the attackers had to be to kill them. Come, let's go up and take a look at the peak, Ling Han said. There was not just a single peak here, but it was obvious that this peak right in front of Ling Han and his group was the most attention-grabbing. That massive paw was really too obvious. The 3 of them climbed the mountain, and had just taken a single step when they immediately felt a frightening murderous aura surge towards them. Ling Han was still fine, but the Empress did not have as strong a physique as he did. She felt as if the mountain winds were as sharp as blades. Her origin power automatically activated, and formed a shield around her. This had to be because of that gigantic paw on the mountain top. When the gusts of wind brushed past, they brought some flecks of blood with them, causing the wind to carry a frightening murderous aura and possess astonishing destructive power. Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor directly spat out a mouthful of blood, and was sent flying. It had to be known that both Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing had advanced into the Eternal River tier, and that was merely a broken paw, yet was already enough to make the Empress feel as if she had come up against a powerful enemy. From this, it could be discerned how powerful the owner of this paw had to be when alive. Ling Han drew the Azura Demon Emperor into the Black Tower, and walked with the Empress on the mountain path. The mountain path was not cragged, as it was paved by an unknown metal all the way to the mountain top. There was a palace there, but it was precisely the target of attacks of that giant paw, and so had been largely destroyed. Ling Han was stunned, and couldn't help but crouch down. This is level 16 godly metal. Level 16 was just one step away from reaching the level of saintly material, and it was actually used as steps. Just how extravagant was that? After Ling Han got over his shock, he laughed loudly. His divine demon sword precisely needed to swallow high-grade godly metal to advance further. Though there was still no need for such luxurious material as level 16 godly metal, if it refined a whole row of steps made of level 16 godly metal like this, it was enough to advance from level 16 to level 17 in a single go. Amazing. He began to pry open the steps. It was impossible to take in the whole mountain, but prying open the steps and then taking them into the Black Tower would be nothing too difficult. And only someone with such strong physique as he could pry open the steps as he stood against the terrifying mountain winds. Though the Empress wanted to help, she soon felt so strained that she had to stand on the sidelines. Her origin power was not enough. Just rest, I'll do it, Ling Han said smilingly. He could not bear having his wife doing such harsh labor. Just look at her soft skin and tender flesh. He was now very excited, happily working. The divine demon sword was now like a bottomless pit, so managing to fill it a bit was enough to fill him with elation. Too bad. Why is there no level 11 godly metal? Now, I can only store this level of godly metal and look at it, I can't use it yet. As he dug, he kept muttering. This was taking his gains for granted. The Empress couldn't help but cover her smile as her slender figure trembled in humor, her bearing graceful. But right at this moment, both of them froze at the same time as they discovered that there were a few additional auras that had appeared out of nowhere. They looked down towards the foot of the mountain and saw that 7 people had appeared out of thin air there. They were all young men and women, thriving with heroic spirit as if they were true phoenixes and true dragons. Fonga. Ling Han stopped, revealing a hint of killing intent. Don't be anxious. Little sister is under the protection of 3 Saint King level true phoenixes, and even if a great saint came, he may not be able to harm her, the Empress immediately consoled him. Ling Han nodded. He had panicked due to his concern for her. These people have arrived too coincidentally, he said. Eternal River Tears did not have the ability to force the chariot pulled by 3 true phoenixes to a stop. Thus, it must have been that they just happened to arrive here. This was so much of a coincidence that it was practically impossible to happen. Ling Han continued to dig. They were merely in the Eternal River Tier. He did not take them to heart at all. Below, the 7 people began to ascend the mountain. This path is really quite worn out, someone complained. It seems like the steps have been dug out. How could that be? The women of the group shook their heads. If they were to steal anything, they would be stealing that palace on the summit. Who would be interested in the steps? That was really too tasteless. Furthermore, their ancestor was among the group that had attacked this place all those years ago, so how could they have such poor scope? Stealing even the steps, they would have gone crazy from poverty, right? That's right. They should have been damaged during a battle. The other men nodded respectively. However, the appearance seemed to be a little too different from the signs of being damaged during a battle. If it had to be claimed that it was their ancestor that had made the move those years ago, that was fine, but he had clearly not succeeded, so what time would he have to even remove the steps? Strange, indeed very strange. They continued walking up the mountain, and very soon, they saw Ling Han, who was presently working hard at digging. At this moment, their eyes almost popped out in shock, and their mouths went wide open. Fuck, there really was someone that had been driven mad by poverty, not sparing even the step. Chapter 1506 8 Stones Forbidden Land. 1506 8 Stones Forbidden Land. Had you come from the wild? Gone mad from poverty? Digging out even the steps? This was really too ignorant of the ways of the world, right? Didn't he see there was a palace at the summit? The things hidden inside would definitely be more valuable than what you were digging out now. Just how stupid could you be? How short-sighted? In this short instant, the 7 of them stuck a sign of country bumpkin on Ling Han. Only that kind of person would want to dig out these golden steps when they saw them. Though they were also slightly tempted. This was level 16 godly metal that had paved out a mountain path. Such wealth, TSK, too astonishing. They held up against the terrifying mountain winds, and soon came closer. TSK. When they saw Empress Luan Xing, everyone bore a stunned expression. Even the 3 women's mouths were slightly gaping, their eyes wide. Though they were confident in their own beauty, and did not admit inferiority to any of the other 3, in front of the Empress, even they had no choice but to concede. The gap was not just a little bit. Even if they did not want to admit it, there was nothing they could do. The 4 men were even worse. 2 of them were already drooling, and their saliva had wet part of their clothes. It was as if they were idiots who had never seen a woman before. How could there possibly be such a beautiful woman in this world? Every movement and gesture from her were perfection itself. Cough. A young man was the first to come back to his senses, and said, I am who can, and these are my clansmen. Since we were able to meet in this boundless universe, it is clear we were destined to meet. Why don't we work together to explore this mystery realm? When they heard his words, the other three men all looked excited, while the three women's expressions darkened. They felt inferior in front of the Empress, so they naturally did not want all the attention to be drawn by the Empress. Ordinarily speaking, if outsiders had appeared in a mystery realm that had such astonishing background, the first reaction should be to kill them to keep the secret, but who asked the Empress to be too beautiful? She was so beautiful that all their hearts had melted, and they actually brought up the suggestion of exploring the mystery realm together. Empress Luan Xing didn't even want to speak. Her attention was only focused on Ling Han, and as for the others, they were ignored completely. Ling Han's eyes swept over the group. He had already seen everyone from the low extreme of Eternal River tier to the consummate level, so even if their cultivation level was higher than his, he could still estimate their cultivation levels through comparison. Out of the 7 of them, the speaker, who can, had the highest cultivation level. He had reached the peak stage of the consummate level. It was extremely possible that he was a young big shot that was in no way inferior to people like Ren Feiyun and Qi Tian. He was a little surprised. The highest authority in this area of the universe should be the Star Sand Saint, so those young king tiers who hoped to become saints should have enrolled in the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. However, Ling Han was very unfamiliar with these 7 people. Furthermore, he did not spot the sign of the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy on their clothing, so they should not be senior brothers and senior sisters that had enrolled in the academy 1 or 2 million years ago. Moreover, these 7 people were too young. A difference of 1 to 2 million years was still very apparent. With Ling Han's judgment, these 7 people should be less than 1 million years old. Less than 1 million years old, yet there was 1 in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier, 2 in the early stage of the consummate level, 3 in the high extreme, and 1 in the medium extreme. This lineup was a little frightening. What place had produced so many top-grade prodigies? Ling Han thought such, but said, no need, we will just depend on our own abilities. Immediately, Hu Kan and his group looked displeased. What kind of place do you think this is? The mystery realm left behind by the Heavenly River King. If news of it leaked out, putting aside such Eternal River tiers like themselves, even small saints, medium saints, or even great saints would not be qualified to enter. This was a stage that only Saint Kings could enter. And now, they were kindly inviting the 2 of them to explore together. Firstly, they were planning to give some face to the Empress, and secondly, they wanted to keep these 2 under their eye, and when they were done, they would definitely bring them back to the Forbidden Land. What a joke! They had obtained the treasures left behind by the Heavenly River King. Could such news be allowed to spread out? Wouldn't that then draw the attention and aggression from the other Forbidden Lands? Wasn't it precisely the hidden treasure here that had caused the ancestors of the Forbidden Lands to attack the Heavenly River King together? He was not giving them face. Brat, you are so inconsiderate. The only one in the medium extreme of Eternal River tier walked out. His name was Hu Bing. You really are a country bumpkin that has no idea of his own weight. This is the secret treasure of the Heavenly River King. The fact that you managed to come in here is already a mighty good fortune, and you still want a share of the loot. Hu Kan and the others did not stop him. In their eyes, Hu Bing alone was enough to suppress this pair, and everything was fine as long as he did not injure that exquisite beauty. Ling Han was surprised. These 7 people actually knew of the treasure trove of the Heavenly River King? They knew of the situation in this place? Then that meant that it was no coincidence that they had come here. Ling Han couldn't help but become interested, and he asked, where have you all come from? Us. At first, Hu Bing was disdainful of even speaking more with Ling Han, but when the exceedingly beautiful Empress's eyes focused on him, with a sliver of curiosity in them, he immediately felt his blood boil and became rash. He very much wanted to show off a little, and immediately spoke up, we come from the 8 Stones Forbidden Land. 8 Stones? Forbidden Land? What was that? Ling Han looked at the Empress, and she shook her head slightly, expressing that she had never heard of this before. Thus, He deliberately spurred them on to reveal more. What 8 stones forbidden land? Merely the name sounds like no decent place, unable to produce any kind of elite. You all are a bunch of country bumpkins. See country bumpkins? This time, Hukan and his whole group were furious. Whom was he calling country bumpkins? Ah, who was the country bumpkin here? Who was the one currently digging out the steps? Ah, he himself was the largest country bumpkin, and he still dared to call others that. Hu Bing couldn't bear it any longer, and declared, "You are a frog that lives at the bottom of a well, so you have never heard of the Forbidden Lands, of course. It should be known that our Forbidden Land has existed forever, and our origins are derived from the Hu Bing." Hukan and the others shouted at the same time, stopping Hu Bing from saying anything further. Only then did Hu Bing's face pale. He pointed at Ling Han and exclaimed, "You dare deceive me." He should not have been so easily infuriated, but who let there be an empress standing on the sidelines? This fact had dragged his intelligence level down endlessly. Ling Han broke into a grin, and said, "You were the one who said the words. Have I forced you? Just continue. Where have the Forbidden Lands originated from?" "None of your business." Hukan interrupted. "Miss, apologies. The treasure trove of the Heavenly River King is much too shocking. We have to ensure that the news would definitely not leak out. I would please trouble the two of you to stay by our side, and when the situation has eased, the two of you will naturally regain your freedom." Though he was saying these words, there was naturally another plan formulating in his head for that man. Just find some way and kill him. As for the woman, with her all on her own and having no one to rely on, wouldn't it be an easy feat to approach her? Looking at the exquisite beauty of the Empress, even he, a young king tier that was close to saint level, could not stop his heart from throbbing wildly, and swallowed a few times. Too beautiful. He definitely had to deal with her before returning. Otherwise, there was a young big shot in the clan who had long since entered into the saint level. If she drew his attention, how could he be qualified to compete? That meant that they were planning to keep the two of them under house arrest. An idea came to Ling Han, and he exclaimed, "We have come from the Great Ling Forbidden Land." He decided to deceive these people again. Chapter 1507 2 Consecutive Losses. Chapter 1507 2 Consecutive Losses. The Great Ling Forbidden Land? Never heard of it. Was there such a forbidden land? Hukan and his group were all looking at each other and shaking their heads, expressing that they had never heard of such a place. Humph, how could a country bumpkin like you possibly come from a forbidden land? Hu Bing humphed. What person that came from a forbidden land would be so ignorant of the ways of the world, and let go of the big prize while grabbing at trifles like the steps? Weren't you embarrassed? Ling Han's mindset was different, though. This whole treasure trove was his, so wherever he started from, who in this world could interfere? You guys haven't even heard of the Great Ling Forbidden Land. You all are really too crude. Ling Han retorted sarcastically. How could the tongue that he had trained in his encounters with the large black dog not be sharp? Hiss, this guy. Hukan and his group were exploding with fury. There was obviously no such forbidden land, and he had to be an imposter, yet he actually called them crude. Don't bicker with him endlessly, Hukan said sinisterly. All right. Hu Bing nodded. His eyes turned on Ling Han, while a cold smirk was upon his lips. He might not be good at blurting out nonsense, but he was truly skilled. No matter how much you were bragging, could that actually become reality? He moved and shot out a fist at Ling Han. Origin power condensed, forming a fist of rock, but the might behind this attack was pitifully small. At most, it was only at the level of the low extreme of the Eternal River tier. Why was it so weak? Very simple. The mountain winds here were filled with frightening destructive power, and one had to use origin power to protect oneself, or his body would be torn into pieces. This was a kind of power of regulation. Thus, the stronger the person, the stronger its effects would be. It was clear that the gap between the cultivation levels of the 7 of them were huge, but they all had to use their full efforts to deal with it. But if I was weak, so would be my enemy. Thus, he was sure that even if his attack was only at the level of the low extreme, he would be able to cause a serious wound to Ling Han, or even kill him. He was only in the low extreme as well. Furthermore, an ordinary eternal river tier would possess only 2 to 3 stars of tier-surpassing battle prowess, at most, and now, with that being hindered as well, how would Ling Han be capable of blocking his attack? Hu Kan and the others crossed their arms over their chests as they watched, appearing very arrogant. They were all king tiers that had come from a forbidden land. Asdi from young prodigies that had similarly come from a forbidden land. Who would be able to match them in this world? None, definitely none. Ling Han very casually gave him a look. He tapped out a finger, and then began to dig at the steps again. He was a very busy person. Hu Bing's hair was almost standing on ends in his fury. That was really too arrogant. We are fighting here, and you are actually still digging. Will you die if you dig a little less? Since that is the case, then just go ahead and die. He controlled the stone fist to head in Ling Han's direction. The tap of Ling Han's finger turned into a flash of sword chi that slashed the stone fist. Suddenly, sword light sank in, and this stone fist was actually sliced apart by force. Immediately, it changed the direction of attack, and the two halves passed by either side of Ling Han, not causing the slightest bit of damage. But this flash of sword chi was still slicing towards Hu Bing as if its might had not been weakened in the slightest. Hu Bing was shocked. Under ordinary circumstances, he naturally would not be afraid of any attack coming from the low extreme of the Eternal River tier, but the problem was he was currently expending the majority of his origin power on defending against the mountain winds. And previously, he had used what origin power he had left in his attack, so there was no other origin power he had left to strengthen his defense. Though this attack was not too strong, it just happened to be the last straw to break the camel's back. Hu Bing. A woman moved, and stretched out a palm that turned into a hand that seemed to be made out of a jade, forming a block in front of Hu Bing. Hu Bing was incredibly grateful. Thank you, Sister Jing. However, he had not even finished his thanks when the sword chi had reached him. That jade palm shattered instantly, and the chi continued to slash towards Hu Bing. Pu. He had not expected this attack at all. At first, he had thought that since Hu Jing had made her move, it would definitely be enough to help him out, but now he could only watch helplessly as the attack reached him and slashed into his chest. A streak of blood immediately spurted out, and he was sent flying with the force. Brother Bing, the other 6 called out at the same time. They all raced out, and managed to catch Hu Bing. I'm fine, Hu Bing said with difficulty. Though this attack from Ling Han was very powerful, after being blocked 2 consecutive times, its might had also considerably lessened, so it was natural that it could not possibly deal too much damage to him. More importantly, it was because the mountain winds here were too powerful, otherwise, he would not fear this attack. Hu Kan and the others all bore livid expressions. They had initially thought they would be able to easily suppress this country bumpkin, but in the end, it was Hu Bing who was wounded by his attack instead. This made them feel very shocked and also embarrassed. Strange, it was obvious that all of them were affected by the mountain winds, and none of them could release their strongest battle prowess. He was only in the low extreme, so how could he be this powerful? Could it be that he had really come from that whatever Great Ling Forbidden Land? If not, what other place could possibly produce such a powerful prodigy? We have underestimated you. The one who had moved to help Hu Bing out of his dilemma, Hu Jing, stepped out. There was a hint of anger on her beautiful face. She had already moved, and yet was still unable to fully protect Hu Bing, which angered her. Ling Han ignored her, and continued digging out the steps. Just how much was he looking down on her? At this instant, Hu Jing really felt an impulse to commit murder. Yet Empress Luan Xing stepped out, and said, "My husband does not have the time to deal with you. Let me exchange a few blows with you." Hu Jing's eyes were sinister. She had resented Empress Luan Xing for snatching her spotlight in the first place, and now added with the ire she felt from Ling Han, this was a good opportunity to vent her anger on this woman. She would not kill her. Instead, she wanted to leave behind a few large scars that could not be removed on her face so that she would eternally become a hideous hag. And then we'll see if you still dare to show off your beauty. She moved directly. With a soft exclamation, the mountain boomed repeatedly. Innumerably stone spikes shot up from underground, and stabbed towards Empress Luan Xing like they were multiple spears. The Empress was not Ling Han. She did not have an astonishing physique. In this place, she, too, would be greatly hindered, but she still had a slab of the absolute beginning stone. This was a god tool that could disperse all attacks. She shot out. Peng, 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 peng. The brick slammed down on them, and everything was shattered. A great beauty was actually waving around a brick. This was definitely inappropriate, but the Empress's beauty surpassed all else. Even if she was waving a brick, she was still exceedingly beautiful, presenting a pleasing sight to all. She reached her directly, and slammed down the brick on Hu Jing's face. Under the effects of the mountain winds, how could Hu Jing block this blow? She was sent flying, collapsing on the ground. This time, her injuries were far more serious than Hu Bing's. She was helped to her feet by the others. The words Ancestor Wenshin were shockingly printed on her face, making for a humorous sight, but Hu Kan and the others did not feel like laughing at all. They stared at the brick in the Empress's hand and frowned. Absolute beginning stone? Hu Kan said in a low voice. The Empress ignored his question. She was not duty-bound to answer to anyone, that was how proud she was. It must be the absolute beginning stone. It cannot be damaged by external power, and has ancestral words etched on it as well. It must be the absolute beginning stone, a woman said with absolute confidence. Her name was Hu Shuyu, and she was in the early stage of the consummate level. Snatch it. The eyes of the others all lit up. Don't think that the absolute beginning stone did not have much power. Because of its unique trait of not breaking down, it would sometimes be used to record some secrets, and it could be passed on through the generations. Thus, it was possible that there was an astonishing secret technique hidden in an absolute beginning stone. Worse came to worst, even if there was none, absolute beginning stone was too extraordinary in the immortal realm, and could be used as a precious treasure for defense. Chapter 1508 Origins of the Forbidden Lands. 1508 Origins of the Forbidden Lands. But the problem was that the mountain winds here were too bitingly cold, and greatly restricted their cultivation levels. In that way, the Empress, who had hold of the absolute beginning stone, was too mighty. How were they supposed to defeat her? It was not that they were not strong. The truth was the conditions here were too much in favor of the Empress. Let's go. We'll go somewhere else first. Once they descend the mountain, we will apprehend them, Hu Kan promptly decided. Even if he was in the peak stage of the consummate level, he was not confident that he could apprehend Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing here. Especially Ling Han. It was really too strange. It was like he was completely unaffected by the mountain winds. Hey, why are you leaving? Ling Han stood up. We were just having a fun conversation, so how could you leave without saying goodbye? Who was having a fun conversation with you? Do we know each other very well? Hu Kan shook his head. Ignore him. Retreat. There was no need to get momentary satisfaction. Fighting in this place was much too disadvantageous for them. The 7 of them wanted to leave, yet Ling Han blocked their path of retreat with a single leap, not allowing them to descend the mountain. When they saw Ling Han fly over their heads, the 7 of them could not help but pale. Are you a freak? The mountain winds here possessed frightening destructive power. They didn't even dare to walk too fast. Otherwise, when the winds tore at them, they would be wounded all over, and there was even a chance to be directly killed on the spot. This was also why Hu Bing and Hu Jing had been hit previously, because they dared not dodge. But Ling Han actually managed to leap over their heads. The winds were not just stronger at a higher altitude, but the speed of this leap was also fast, yet Ling Han was standing there completely unharmed. There was not even a single scratch on him. This caused their hair to stand on ends. Just what technique had this guy cultivated to have such frightening defenses? Could it be that he really was a freak from some forbidden land? They were initially absolutely sure that there was no Great Ling forbidden land, but now, their conviction couldn't help but waver. After all, there was still quite a large number of forbidden lands, and it was normal if they had not heard of 1 or 2 among them. Perhaps the others just liked to keep a low profile? Ling Han smiled. All of us are siblings from forbidden lands. Come, let's sit down and have a nice chat. Hu Kan and his group were all shaking their heads internally. They really wanted to throw curses back at Ling Han, but with their identity and status, they naturally disdained to say such crude words. Hu Kan was the leader of their group, after all, so he spoke up, "Since we are all brothers from Forbidden Lands, we can have a chat at any time, right? Why don't you come and visit our 8 stones Forbidden Land later? Do you dare accept? Once you have come, don't even think of leaving. Even if you have a massive secret, you will have to obediently hand it over. All right, I will pay a visit to your place later. However, I am not familiar with the 8 stones Forbidden Land. Why don't you introduce it to me first?" Ling Han said with a smile. To speak frankly, he wanted to know of the origins of the 8 stones Forbidden Land. These 7 people were very strong and very condescending. Without powerful abilities, this was definitely the behavior of an idiot. However, all 7 of them were in the Eternal River tier, so they weren't idiots, but rather had a very strong background. Hu Kan strove in the opposite direction, and said, "I have not heard of the Great Ling Forbidden Land, either. Why don't you talk about it to us, brother?" Both sides were smiling cheerfully at each other, looking to be completely on good terms. A thought appeared in Ling Han's head, and he asked, "It can't be that the 8 stones Forbidden Land were among those who attacked the Heavenly River King together, right? Otherwise, how could it be possible that these people had so coincidentally appeared?" This was really a lucky stroke. He had guessed correctly, but the process was completely wrong. But it was fine, as long as the result was correct. The expressions of Hu Kan and his group shifted slightly. The secret treasure of the Heavenly River King was too important. They felt regret now. In truth, they should have sent one of their number back to make a report, but according to the circumstances then, who would be willing to return? The first to enter into the mystery realm would definitely obtain the largest gains. There was no need for the 7 of them to admit it. Ling Han knew just by looking at their expressions. Though the 7 of them had strong abilities, it was obvious that they had not traveled for too long in the outside world. They were not very subtle, and all their thoughts were written on their faces. He pondered internally. At the time, the Heavenly River King had been on the end of the combined attacks of a great many elites, and there were also the bodies of 3 Phoenix Kings outside. Then, those who had attacked the Heavenly River King together would definitely have to be mighty figures of Saint King level. They had already reached that height. What else could they possibly want? To enter into the celestial realm, and achieve true immortality. But how was it possible that those from the immortal realm knew of the existence of the celestial realm? Just like how the Star Sand Saint, the notionless saint, also thought that the apex of martial arts world was the Saint King, and neither could avoid the most fundamental regulation of the heaven and earth life, aging, illness, and death. Thus, there was only one possibility. Ling Han nodded, and asked, "You have all been exiled from the celestial realm?" When these words were spoken, Hu Kan and his group immediately became stirred up. "Nonsense, how could we have possibly been exiled? It was a few forces of the celestial realm that rose up in rebellion, and we were only forced to leave the celestial realm because we lost the war. We will definitely return to the celestial realm and take back all that is rightfully ours." These people exclaimed with bloodshot eyes. It was obvious that this idea was regularly instilled into them. That was why they would become so hot-blooded and rash upon a single mention of it. Ling Han chuckled, and said, "Don't be stirred up. Speak calmly. Humph, though you have wormed facts out of us, this is not the slightest bit advantageous to you." Hu Kan looked coldly at Ling Han. "Since you know of the celestial realm, you should also be a victim of that massive wipeout long ago." At this moment, he truly believed that Ling Han was from that whatever Great Ling Forbidden Land. Otherwise, no one aside from those from a forbidden land would know of the existence of the celestial realm, especially when he also mentioned the great turmoil that happened then. Ling Han really wanted to introduce Jiyu Dawi to them. He was one who had directly come from the celestial realm. These people would have to address him as ancestor, right? Then, with him and Jiyu Dawi being fellow sect disciple brothers in name, these people should also address him as ancestor. He thought that, and a strange smile involuntarily appeared on his face, causing Hu Kan and his group to feel creeped out. They felt a coldness rise up in their bodies despite themselves. Ling Han coughed, and said, "How many Saint Kings are there in your 8 stones Forbidden Land?" He was very curious about the strength of a forbidden land. There had been innumerable people who had been cast out of the celestial realm. Some were exiled with their entire tribe, and it was possible that this was what led to the formation of the present forbidden lands because they possessed a complete martial arts inheritance. But some had their entire tribe wiped out, and only one or two tribesmen managed to escape to the immortal realm, and that was the origin of the ancient divine tribes. An example was Empress Luan Xing, who could only rely on her bloodline inheritance. Naturally, she was weaker. Humph, you want to know our baseline? Hukan smirked. However, it is fine to tell you. Our 8 stones forbidden land is one of the very best of all the forbidden lands. He did not clearly say how many Saint Kings there were in the 8 stones forbidden land, but Ling Han was sure that the number was definitely not limited to 1. Ling Han smiled, and said, "This mystery realm is very important, so I will need to trouble you all to obediently follow me for a few days." Hukan and his group all looked livid. Previously, they had wanted to keep Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing under house arrest, but in the blink of an eye, their positions had actually exchanged completely. How could they endure that? "You want to keep us captive?" Hu Jing questioned harshly. "Ho ho, why do you have to put it so negatively?" Ling Han shook his head and smiled. "However, if you must think of it that way, it can also be understood like that." Hukan's expression turned to ice, and he declared, "Then we can only settle this with a battle." Chapter 1509, Gathering Saintly Material. Chapter 1509, Gathering Saintly Material. Ling Han smiled, and said, "If it's a fight you want, it's a fight you'll get." In these conditions, he was really unafraid of anyone in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. Even if someone in the pinnacle level came, he could still manage to put up a fight. Hukan took a deep breath. "Sir, you are underestimating us too much. Do you really think that just because the conditions here are disadvantageous to us, we are completely helpless? Humph, we are merely unwilling to pay that certain price. However, if you are so determined to provoke us, then we'll just let you suffer the consequences of your own actions." He channeled a secret technique, and suddenly his muscles bulged up one after another. His clothes ripped and revealed a body that was completely made out of rock. His figure had also enlarged by a whole 3 to 4 times. Though it was completely bare, a creature that looked like a stone statue would not be too embarrassing to look at. Brother Can has cultivated the 8 stones technique to the 2nd level, and the moment he channels it, his physique is invincible, a woman said, her voice filled with envy. This was the strongest secret technique of the 8 stones tribe, and was also their foundation. Though every person could be taught it, they normally only learnt the 1st level. The requirements for the 2nd level of the technique were too high. There were not many that had successfully cultivated it in the whole 8 stones forbidden land. Hukan was one of them, and thus he truly had a right to be arrogant. When this secret technique was in use, the threat the mountain winds posed to him was immediately greatly reduced, allowing him to be able to draw more of his strength to be used in attack. However, using this secret technique itself would require expending a little origin power, and added with the fact that the threat of the mountain winds had not been erased, he could use half of his true abilities at most. In his eyes, would half of his true abilities still be not enough? "You're going down." Hukan moved, his figure shooting out towards Ling Han, charging forwards like a wild bull. 8 stones body art, a secret technique of the celestial realm. Ling Han was unafraid. He actually dared compete in physique with him. Just how depressed did he want to make himself? He lifted a foot and dashed, crashing towards Hukan. "You're looking for death." Hukan humphed coldly. He did not mind killing Ling Han. In any case, it was enough to leave only one alive to be interrogated later. Furthermore, Ling Han was no beauty, so what need was there for him to be merciful? He shot out a fist, and multiple stone spikes appeared from his fist. They were incredibly sharp and stabbed towards Ling Han's head. In this one attack, your form and spirit would be destroyed. Ling Han also shot out a fist, but there was sword intent entwined around it. A blood crow flew out. If anyone from the 8th campus was here, they would definitely exclaim in surprise. That was because this blood crow was a few hundred times larger than the usual that was summoned from a normal blood crow formation. And you called that a blood CRW? It was obviously a giant blood-colored beast. The blood crow flapped its wings, and greeted Hukan's fist. As its wings flapped, multiple flashes of sword chi shot out, with the power of time entwined within. 10 formations joined as one, fused with the tide of the ages, and sent out with the lightning sword technique. Abruptly, Hukan paled. He already felt fear before this attack even reached him. More importantly, he was unable to use his full abilities at this time. Boom! The blood crow reached him, and Hukan's fist immediately crumbled as endless sword chi swept over him. Ah! Hukan humphed lowly, and retreated continuously. His body turned back to normal in an instant, while blood was spewing from his right fist. He was both furious and shocked. Damn it, if he could use his full abilities, he would definitely be able to suppress his opponent. But now, he had to draw out the majority of his power to oppose the mountain winds, and could not completely use his full battle prowess at all, which was what caused him to be of no match. Linghan smiled slightly, and said, "Just surrender obediently. I've still got a lot of questions to ask you guys." "In your dreams?" Hukan smirked coldly. Linghan was shocked. "You guys want to generously venture to your death?" "Who said that?" Hukan drew out a talisman. Linghan's expression suddenly became serious. If this was the decree of a saint, the present him was not yet qualified to oppose it. "Let's go." Hukan tore the talisman, and a brilliant light swept over them. Suddenly, the 7 of them had vanished without a trace. So it turned out to be a teleportation talisman. Linghan saw that they did not teleport too far away. They had only arrived at the foot of the mountain. Because this was a small dimension, and the grade of the teleportation talisman was not as high as the regulations of this place, even if they have teleported, they had not left. They had merely left this peak. However, there was no such frightening winds at the foot of the mountain. "Brat, do you dare come down and fight us?" they called out in challenge. There were 7 of them in all, and all of their cultivation levels were above those of Linghan and his companion, and yet they actually had to flee from them. This was too embarrassing. If this was a battle at the foot of the mountain, they would be completely unafraid. "If you can, come up here." Linghan continued digging out the steps. He couldn't care less about them. The 7 of them exploded in fury. This country bumpkin was really despicable. "Let's go to the other peaks and check them out first." They did not dare go to that mountain peak where Linghan was anymore. "Should we send someone back to make a report?" Hu Jing asked with some hesitation. "Whom should we send?" Hukan glared. "By now, none of us would be willing to leave, right? Moreover, a trip back and forth would take 3 to 4 years' time, at least, and by then, would there still be anything of value left behind? The remaining 6 all remained silent. In any case, none of them were willing to leave. This was the treasure of the Heavenly River King, and it was said that it was connected with the Celestial Realm. "Come, let's go to the other peaks." In the end, none of them left. Instead, they headed to the mountain peak next to this one. Linghan did not bother with them. He was happily storing away this godly metal, and progressing slowly upwards. As long as these 7 people had not left this place, he was in no rush. A day later, the 2 of them finally arrived at the summit. Now that they were here, the aura exuding from that paw was even more frightening, causing Linghan's and Empress Luanxing's heart to beat wildly. There was a chance that their hearts could explode at any time. "Do you want to take some temporary shelter?" Linghan asked the Empress. "I can still hold on now. When I can't, I will tell you," the Empress said gently. Linghan nodded, and surveyed the place. The palace that had been blasted by this massive paw had once been incredibly grand, and that could still be distinguished even now. Every brick and tile was extraordinary, and there were still slivers of divine brilliance entwined around them. However, being stepped on by that paw, the divine essence within had been completely destroyed. There were few bricks and tiles that were still unscathed. "This is green origin jade." Linghan recognized this material, and couldn't help but be shocked. This was saintly material. According to legends, as long as it had reached the size of a fist, it was possible that it would gain consciousness and a new life would be nurtured from it. And if saintly material had their own consciousness, What kind of concept was that? That they could become saints in future, just like the Stone Emperor's old man. Yet the green origin jade in front of them was the main material for constructing the palace. This was far more than the size of a fist. This was practically a small mountain's worth. Ling Han felt an urge to complain. Though the green origin jade was merely level 17, and belonged to the lowest grade of saintly material, just how wasteful was it to use it to build the walls of a palace? No wonder even those tribes exiled from the celestial realm coveted the heavenly river king, and did not even hesitate to join forces together to attack him. This was indeed enough to draw the envy of others. Unfortunately, the majority of the green origin jade had been damaged by this pour, and all their divinity had been erased. They had become mere scraps, and this made Ling Han want to beat his chest and stamp his feet in anger. All of this was his. Whom did this damn pour belong to? In future, he would definitely seek the owner out for a reckoning. Ling Han picked through the rubble, and stored the remaining green origin jade into the Black Tower. As he rummaged, his heart continued to ache. If anyone saw this, they would definitely be extremely curious. You were gathering saintly material, yet why did you look like you were about to go and pick a fight? Chapter 1510 Treasure Trove. Chapter 1510 Treasure Trove. The majority of the palace had already been destroyed. Even if there were a considerable number of rooms that had not suffered the direct hit of the massive claw, they had still suffered serious damage. One could imagine what kind of terrifying shock wave had been generated when this paw had landed. Even a palace built of saintly material could not withstand it, and had been shattered into ruins by the force. This should have been the move of a saint king. That was the only way that a mere shock wave could damage saintly material, the lowest grade of saintly material. As Ling Han and Empress Luan Xing circled around the palace, they continued to gather pieces of green origin jade. Whether intact or damaged, they'd just store them away first, and then could slowly pick through them later. Ling Han was like a swarm of locusts sweeping through, leaving nothing behind wherever he passed. The Empress hid her smile behind a hand, feeling that this was amusing. They had soon finished clearing the last area in the farthest outskirts, and were advancing inwards. They saw that this giant paw had slammed into the palace and shattered the ground, and an underground space was revealed. Ling Han and the Empress glanced at each other and simultaneously exclaimed, "Treasure trove." There was another space beneath the palace. What else could it be but a treasure trove? Initially, it should be that it could only be opened when one found the right mechanism, but the owner of the massive paw was too strong. With a single strike, he had damaged the walls of this treasure trove. His power had reached the level of destroying saintly material. The tips of the claws had penetrated into the ground, but because these claws were too big, even if they pierced only holes, they were big enough to allow one person to enter. However, even if a tiger had died, its might was still present. This paw was still exuding a powerful aura, and the closer one approached, the stronger the feeling of suffocation. Even the Empress could not stand against it. If she tried to forcefully approach, her delicate figure would be shattered by the force. Ling Han was still fine. His physique was too strong, and had far surpassed his actual cultivation level. This kind of pressure from a mere aura was also based on regulations, and merely targeted one's cultivation level instead of being absolute. Hence, Ling Han was even more relaxed than a saint. He drew the Empress into the Black Tower first, and then slowly approached again. Now that he had reached this place, even he dared not walk too fast. He could clearly see that the regulations had solidified in the area surrounding the giant claw, and formed multiple blades of gold that were floating in the air. Stimulated by the ripple of air caused by his entry, these golden blades floated towards him. They merely trembled, and even the air itself was cut open, revealing multiple tears. Ling Han involuntarily paled. This was not just power of regulation, but rather the non-dispersible willpower of a saint king. If he suffered a single strike, it was guaranteed that he would be torn to pieces even with his physique. After all, his absolute physique was only equivalent to being close to level 15 godly metal. He would not be able to withstand them at all. The golden blades floated over at a very slow pace, but the might would not decrease just because their speed was slow. They still possessed the destructive power that was enough to destroy a small saint or even a medium saint. In the instant that the golden blades came close, Ling Han entered into the Black Tower. The golden blades swept past like soft ripples on the surface of a lake, and the ripples slowly smoothed out. When peace had returned, only then did Ling Han exit the Black Tower and continue onwards. He had to enter into the Black Tower with every step he took. It was clear that he was merely about 100 steps away from the underground treasure trove. Under normal circumstances, he could cover that distance with a single leap, but now he took half a day's time to breach this distance. He had finally arrived. Ling Han looked at that giant paw that was just before his eyes. The metallic outer skin was exuding a cold aura, just like the oldest god in the universe. It was obviously incredibly hideous, yet had a kind of sacred aura that filled one with reverence. Too bad he couldn't store this thing away. Otherwise, if he managed to extract even a single drop of blood essence, that would still be a precious treasure without equal. Ling Han shook his head. If he used divine sense to wrap around this massive claw, it would definitely be shattered at the very first moment and damage his spirit. Even if he did not become an empty shell, his essence would still be injured, and he would not even have to think about advancing further in future. He couldn't help but feel suspicious. This paw so coincidentally just happened to press down on top of the treasure trove. Could it be that its owner had long since been aware that there was something good hidden underneath? If this chariot had been drawn through the universe by 3 living Phoenix Kings all those years ago, then even if he similarly was a Saint King, how could he have managed to catch up? He must have known the course these 3 Phoenix Kings would travel on, and then set up an ambush in advance. Could it be that a spy had appeared among those close to the Heavenly River King? This also well corresponded with the situation now. In a surprise attack, a massive paw appeared, and directly damaged the undefended main palace, reaching the treasure trove directly. But there was no lack of elites on the Heavenly River King's side, either. Immediately, they proceeded to counterattack, and snapped this giant paw off. Ling Han imagined that scene happening, and couldn't help but feel fired up. A battle on the level of Saint Kings would definitely shatter the heavens and crack the earth. It might even be able to destroy stars. He cautiously descended through the crack in the ground. There was a space there that would allow 3 people to pass through, but the massive paw was just right next to it. He did not dare make any big movements, or it would definitely be an action of courting death. Slightly less than half a day later, Ling Han finally managed to climb down. He felt that the clothing on his back was already completely wet with sweat. He breathed a long sigh of relief, and only then did he survey his surroundings. This was indeed a treasure trove, and there were innumerable god tools and godly metal stored here. That mountain path previously had been paved with level 16 godly metal, and just think, even level 16 godly metal was only used as paving stones. So, how valuable would those treasures be that deserved a place in this treasure trove? Level 17, level 18, level 18, level 20. They were all saintly material. Ling Han immediately grinned, his smile so wide that it almost reached his ears. He was rich. He was rich. He stored everything away without any reservations. Though there were a great many high-grade god tools here, none of them were saint tools, because they did not contain the martial intent imprinted by a saint, so they could not resuscitate themselves. But god tools were still god tools. As long as they landed a direct hit, their murderous aura would enter the body, and the destructive power was similarly frightening. His big brother, second brother, and third brother, each of them should get one. His wives, the Empress and Fonga, should also have one each. He could not forget his 6 disciples, either, each of them should have one. Additionally, he might also have to exchange for the horn of a true dragon with Long Xiangyue's auntie, so he had to keep one in reserve, right? Sigh, there was really not enough to go around. As Ling Han stored them away, he sighed mournfully. He also released the Empress so that she could accompany him in his worry. It was certain that countless people would be willing to have this kind of worry. Could it be that this Heavenly River King had burglarized the treasure trove of a major force of the celestial realm? When the Empress saw this, she also received a shock because there was really too much saintly material in this place. Even if the whole immortal realm was searched, they might still not be able to gather so much. Thus, there was only one possibility. The saintly material originated from the celestial realm. Ling Han took whatever was valuable, but there were some saintly materials that had been damaged by the giant claw. Some level 17 and 18 godly metal had also cracked, which caused Ling Han's heart to ache. But when he thought that they would be swallowed by the divine demon sword in the future anyways, who cared if they were damaged or not? Aside from saintly material, there were still saintly medicines here. But they were not alive. Instead, they had been harvested, which made Ling Han very disappointed. If he could transplant them into the Black Tower, his gains would be even greater. In any case, whether he recognized them or not, he stored them all into the Black Tower. But if there's just this stuff, is it enough to draw the combined attack of so many Saint Kings? The Empress suddenly asked. Ling Han startled. Indeed, these things were all valuable, but if it was claimed that a whole group of Saint Kings moved together just to get a piece of saintly material or saintly medicine, this seemed to be making too much of a fuss over a minor issue, right? Chapter 15:11 Will. Chapter 15:11 Will. There is still a last bit of treasure that has not been gathered. Perhaps the variable lies there. Ling Han looked towards the depths of the treasure trove. Ordinarily, the more valuable the treasure, the deeper it would be stored away. Empress Luan Xing was also filled with anticipation. Though her ancestor came from the celestial realm, aside from her bloodline and its perks, she actually did not obtain any other benefits. Thus, she was very curious what a treasure of the celestial realm would look like. The two of them continued to gather the things around the treasure, and this whole treasure trove was soon emptied out. In front of them, only a low table was left. There was a jade box on top. It wouldn't be another world hidden in a box, right? Ling Han and the Empress exchanged looks. Right until this moment, they had not yet discovered anything above saint level. Indeed, this treasure trove was considerably valuable, but if it was a massive migration of the forces of the celestial realm, their wealth would also attain this level. Previously, Ling Han had viewed Ding Zizhen's memories, and had some understanding of the wealth of the Ding Zizhen, and the Ding clan was a severing mundane tier-level force. This kind of ancestor was actually numbered in the tens. Obviously, it was impossible that this was a top-tier clan of the celestial realm. The wealth of the Ding clan would not be so inferior. Thus, if it was claimed that a forbidden land ganged up on the Heavenly River King just because of this, Ling Han would not believe that in the slightest. Perhaps an astonishing precious treasure lay hidden within the jade box. Careful, the Empress advised. Her right hand was tightly holding the brick. If things didn't look right, she would immediately slam down the brick. Ling Han nodded, and placed both hands on the jade box, slowly opening it. The jade box was not heavy at all, and was easily opened. A golden light spread out, but it did not have much destructive power. However, it was filled with a great aura, as if an ancient god was about to awaken. As the box gradually opened, the golden light covered the whole underground treasure trove, and even surged out of the palace and filled the skies. But it was only for a short instant. The golden light faded, and there were actually two pieces of paper that were rolled up inside the box. This was considered a treasure. Even if these two pieces of paper were the decree of a saint king, it could only be used a limited number of times and lasted for only a short time. It was even less worthy of the forbidden lands moving out in attack. Strange. Ling Han was startled. He discovered traces of blood on one of the rolled-up papers. Merely a little bit made him feel as if the heavens were pressing down on him. It was an indescribably heavy pressure. This definitely belonged to a supreme elite. Thankfully, this drop of blood did not have any killing intent. Otherwise, a single drop of blood from a saint would be enough to kill any eternal river tier. Ling Han wanted to take out this roll of paper, but discovered that it was actually extraordinarily heavy. No matter how much force he exerted, the paper did not move at all, and there was no sign that it was going to unroll. "I don't believe I can't handle you," Ling Han humphed. Since the blood did not contain killing intent, he directly used his divine sense to wrap around the jade box. Then, with a single thought, the jade box was drawn into the Black Tower. Now that it was in the Black Tower, even if it was a saint king, so what? he would still be killed. When one came right down to it, Ling Han's biggest trump card was the Black Tower. Even the indestructible Heaven's Scroll had been inherited from the Black Tower. Too bad, he still could not use the Black Tower as he liked. Otherwise, he should be invincible in the immortal realm. Whomever he did not like, he could draw them into the Black Tower, and do with them as he liked. Wife, let's go inside the Black Tower. Ling Han and the Empress entered into the Black Tower, and continued to study that jade box. This time, Ling Han was really bold. He casually threw open the jade box. What did he have to fear? He stretched out a hand, and the blood-stained roll of paper was easily taken out. It was as light as a piece of paper. This was a piece of paper in the first place. It had only become so incredible because there was a bloodstain on it. Is it the blood of a saint king? Ling Han asked as he raised his head, but the one he directed the question to was not Empress Luanxing. Small Tower appeared quietly, and lightly shook. It replied, "That's right. It might have been left behind by the Heavenly River King." Ling Han deduced. Empress Luanxing merely smiled slightly, and did not rush him. In front of Ling Han, her patience was astonishingly good. To her, Ling Han was the real treasure that was the most valuable in this world. She possessed this person, and it was equivalent to possessing the whole world. Ling Han slowly unrolled the paper. It was rolled up like a decree, and suppressed by a drop of blood. It could last for eternity, or the power of time would be able to destroy everything. A letter. Ling Han swept an eye over it. This was not a decree. To be precise, it was not a letter, but rather a will. He stood beside the Empress, and began to read. After a long time, they placed the will down, and both mostly figured out what had happened all those years ago. This will was indeed the most valuable treasure in this room, not the will itself, but a piece of information it had left behind. To start from the very beginning. The Heavenly River King was not from a forbidden land, but he was an ancient prodigy. After he awoke his bloodline, his path of martial arts became very smooth, and he also came to know of the existence of the celestial realm from the ancestral teachings that had been passed down through the generations. But after so many years, there were actually a considerable number of ancient tribes that did not believe in the existence of the celestial realm, and thought this was merely a lie spoken by one of their ancestors. At first, the Heavenly River King did not believe it, either, but as his bloodline became stronger and stronger, he gradually believed in its existence, and set out on his path to search for any traces of the celestial realm. However, the result was that he was still completely clueless about the celestial realm. However, he did find the abode wherein a celestial king had died. He only knew that a massive turmoil had happened at the time. This saint king charged out of the celestial realm all by himself, and ultimately died. The treasures that he had brought with him were all obtained by the Heavenly River King. The majority were the saintly materials that Ling Han had seen. This did not overly match with what Small Tower had said, about how godly metal above level 20 was divine metal. Otherwise, how could a celestial king not possess level 21 godly metal, or 5th grade divine metal, or something of the like? None, above top grade saintly material was divine metal, instant success. But even a celestial king did not possess divine metal. This meant that even in the celestial realm, divine metal would also definitely be an incredibly valuable material. Ling Han couldn't help but tighten his hold on the divine demon sword. Before his abilities had reached great accomplishment level, revealing the divine demon sword in the celestial realm was not a good thing. What if it was recognized by others? Perhaps even a celestial king would hunt him down. In the celestial realm, there should be many elites that could see through the Black Tower. This was no longer an absolutely impenetrable shelter. Let's get back to the topic. The Heavenly River King obtained the treasures left behind by a celestial king. Though there was not much, it was enough to allow the Heavenly River King to emerge as a new force and soar in status. But this was not his largest good fortune. Among the treasures left behind by the Celestial King, there were also directions to a certain location, the ancestral grounds of this celestial realm. Even in the celestial realm, none knew of it. Even if they did, they still needed a special method to be able to open it, and this method was also in the hands of the Heavenly River King. The Heavenly River King had long desired to charge into the celestial realm. At the same time, he also gathered some people who shared his ambition, such as the 12 generals. They were all from ancient tribes, or it would be impossible for all of them to have reached the level of great saint. But at this time when the Heavenly River King was most complacent, he suffered the combined attack of a great many forbidden lands, and the root of the trouble lay in his most trusted assistant, Open Cloud's King. He was like a brother to him, yet informed and contacted the various great forbidden lands to set up an ambush on the path where the chariot pulled by the 3 phoenixes would definitely pass. Chapter 15:12 Blood of a Saint King. Chapter 15:12 Blood of a Saint King. After this battle, 11 of the 12 generals died in battle, and the last only managed to escape with the Heavenly River King, protecting him at the risk of his own life. However, in the end, he still died. Thankfully, this person entered into a small world, and escaped the pursuit of the Forbidden Lands. He also built the 12 palaces mystery realms, and passed on the treasures left behind by the Heavenly River King. And though the Heavenly River King had endured the combined attack of Saint Kings from a great many forbidden lands, he was really amazing. In that kind of situation, he had still seriously injured the Open Cloud's King and left behind this will and sent the chariot away, while he himself blocked those Saint Kings from pursuing. Of course, he had still died in the end. If he had managed to still stay alive after being ganged up on by so many Saint Kings, that would really have been too illogical. Being able to reach Saint King level in the immortal realm was like being able to reach the 9th layer of the shattering void tier in a small world. They were all top-grade prodigious elites. The Heavenly River King said that since we have obtained the treasures he left behind, we would have to kill the Open Cloud's King on his behalf. Otherwise, his blood would become a curse and pester us eternally. Ling Han wore a strange expression. When he finished reading this will, it was as if that drop of blood had come back to life, and was about to sink into the bodies of Ling Han and Empress Luanxing. Even if a Saint King had died for millions and millions of years, his obsession was still incredibly frightening, and could kill small saints and medium saint. It was possible for even weaker great saints to suffer disaster. Unfortunately, this was inside the Black Tower. Putting aside the fact that this was only a drop of blood from a Saint King and a sliver of obsession, even if it was a Saint King himself, so what? Ling Han would definitely not allow a drop of blood from another to enter his body, much less his wife. He said to that drop of blood, "Please rest assured, Senior. When I have become a great saint or a Saint King, I will definitely seek out that Open Cloud's King for an accounting." The motive behind the Open Cloud's King's rebellion was naturally the treasures left behind by the Celestial King. He had long since known the location of the ancestral grounds of the Celestial King, but the method to open it was only known to the Heavenly River King, and now it was also known by Ling Han and Empress Luanxing. Yet the Open Cloud's King had still obtained a secret technique of the Celestial King. Even if he didn't become a Celestial King, it should not be too difficult for him to use it to break through to the Celestial realm. However, the Heavenly River King had severely wounded the Open Cloud's King, and injured his life force, which also severed his hopes of advancing into the Severing Mundane. Thus, Ling Han needed only advance to become a great saint or Saint King level, and he would be qualified to kill the Open Cloud's King. The person that the Heavenly River King hated the most was the Open Cloud's King. At the time, he delivered a serious wound onto the Open Cloud's King even at the risk of his life because he did not want the latter to be capable of entering into the celestial realm. Then, even if no one managed to obtain the treasures he had left behind in the end, the Open Cloud's King would still die of old age, unable to achieve immortality. Of course, it would naturally be best if someone could give him a chance at revenge. Betrayed by his most trusted, loving each other but wanting to kill each other at the same time, not willing to rest until the other is dead, Ling Han mused ruefully. He could not imagine how it would feel like if Feng Poyun, the Rain Emperor, and Murong Qing stabbed him in the back. He definitely did not believe his 3 brothers would treat him this way, just like how he could not possibly ever betray his 3 brothers. What I hate the most is this kind of person. Even without the request from the Heavenly River King, I would also kill him, Ling Han declared firmly. In his eyes, as long as the Rain Emperor and the others spoke up, he would share with them the method to open the ancestral grounds of the celestial king that he possessed without hesitation. No matter how valuable this treasure was, could its value compare to their brotherhood? I think if the Open Clouds King had asked, the Heavenly River King would likely not have refused. Otherwise, he would not have been so furious after being betrayed. Ling Han shook his head. Empress Luan Xing continued, perhaps, the Open Clouds King had never trusted the Heavenly River King fully. From the very beginning, his motive was to gain benefits from the Heavenly River King, and thus he thought others were like him as well. He thought that the Heavenly River King would definitely not reveal this secret to him, and would even be on guard against him. Hence, he simply decided to take the risk, and invite the wolf into the house. Ling Han shook his head. Going by the look of things, it was possible that this massive paw that had pierced through the treasure trove belonged to the Open Clouds King. He naturally best knew the location of the treasure trove. This old bastard even damaged so much of my godly metal and saintly material. I will not spare him, he said through clenched teeth. This massive paw had damaged who knew how much saintly material, causing his heart to ache severely. Meanwhile, Empress Luan Xing smiled in spite of herself, shaking her head. She had not thought that Ling Han would have such an adorable side to him. There was still a scroll left behind, and this was really the decree of a saint. The strongest attack of the Heavenly River King was sealed within. However, the Heavenly River King was already at the end of his line at the time. It was already very impressive he managed to leave behind a will. Thus, the defense of this decree was not that strong. As time passed, the majority of power and regulations in this decree had eroded, and its might now was only at the late stage of the Eternal River tier. Even its saintly might was gone. Furthermore, it could only be used once. This drop of blood can be used, though, Ling Han thought. This was not an ordinary Saint King's blood, but rather the blood essence of a Saint King. Even the Heavenly River King did not have so many drops in him. Otherwise, how could it possibly ensure that a piece of paper would last for eternity? The divinity in the blood essence had already been mostly worn away, but the murderous aura of a Saint King was still present. Thrown out, this would still possess incredibly frightening might. I've got another trump card. Too bad it can only be used once, just like the decree. Though he was saying that, Ling Han was still all smiles. If he used this thing at the right time, even a great saint would shiver. Small Tower, though, was disdainful. It is merely the blood of a Saint King, and you are already so happy. This is really embarrassing me. Ling Han did not concede, and said, whether I am happy or otherwise, what business is it of yours? In any case, you are the master of the Black Tower, and possess the most powerful precious tool in this world, yet still lose your composure because of a drop of blood from a Saint King. As a tool spirit, even I am ashamed of you, Small Tower stated calmly. I have never met as rebellious a tool spirit as you. Ling Han extended a finger, stabbing at Small Tower. However, Small Tower did not have any solid form, so this finger had directly passed through it. Now you have met one, Small Tower said calmly. Ling Han was so infuriated he shouted. He had also experienced many exchanges with the large black dog, and could be considered skilled at making caustic remarks, but in front of Small Tower, he had to admit defeat. This damn guy always had a monotonous voice, but took its enjoyment from mocking others. However, Ling Han was not really angered. Soon, he calmed down, and asked, I know that Severing Mundane tier lies above Saint level, then what is above the Severing Mundane? He was very curious. What kind of hierarchy divided the elites of the celestial realm? And which level was a celestial king? I don't know, either, Small Tower replied calmly. My memories have not recovered. TSK, and you still call yourself the tool spirit of the most powerful spirit tool in this world, you don't even know that. Ling Han took advantage of the opportunity to counterattack. Yet Small Tower did not have the slightest change in emotion, and replied, if you want to ask how strong a celestial king is, then I can tell you, even if I currently use my full power, I am no match for a celestial king. Ling Han was shocked. Small Tower had never shrunk back before. It had not shown its might all this while merely because it feared alerting the mighty figures in the celestial realm. And according to this, that would be the celestial king. Celestial king in the celestial realm. What level did an existence like that belong to? If that was already the peak, then that was fine. Ling Han only had to be wary of those few people, but if there was still a mix of elites above Celestial King, then every step he took after entering into the celestial realm would be difficult. Sigh, when that old witch came, I should have asked her for more details. Chapter 15:13 Big Sweep. Chapter 15:13 Big Sweep. The old witch Ling Han was talking about was the old woman by Hunyo's side. Because Hunyo called her old witch, Ling Han went with that address as well. When he thought of Hunyo, Ling Han naturally thought of Helian Zun Shui, his parents, his son, and the others that the little jealous lover had taken away with her. Involuntarily, he could not help but miss them more. Over 100 years had already passed. Were they all doing well? His son may already have become a father himself, but it was not definite. Perhaps his son had focused completely on cultivation, and did not have time to chase girls. At this time, Ling Han was at a bit of a loss. He wanted his son to marry early and possess his own happiness, yet at the same time, he hoped his son had not married so he could personally participate in his son's wedding. Sigh, what's the use of thinking so much? There is nothing I can do. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then gave up. In any case, he was still in the immortal realm, and was unable to go to the celestial realm for the moment, so no matter how much he pondered over the matter, it was useless. Let's go, Empress Luan Xing said to Ling Han. They should make their rounds at the other peaks, and think of a way to set up a trap for Jiyu Dawi. Ling Han nodded, and said, too bad the Heavenly River King did not manage to pass on the cultivation technique of the Celestial King in time, or we would really get rich on this trip. He did not know what level of king-tier Celestial Kings were considered to be at in the Celestial Realm, but they were definitely higher than severing mundane tier, and being able to lay claim to the word king, could they really be ordinary elites? Thus, the cultivation technique of a Celestial King would definitely be extremely precious. Empress Luan Xing took a few steps, and then suddenly said with a soft hum, previously, you recited a few celestial words, which drew out a reaction from my bloodline, and seemed to help me awaken a few memories. The ancestor of my 9 snakes tribe is precisely a celestial king. The Heavenly River King obtained the inheritance of a celestial king, so it was logical that he would know celestial words, and they might not even be ordinary celestial words, but rather celestial words on the level of celestial king. And this had drawn a reaction from Empress Luan Xing's bloodline, which also meant indirectly that the Empress's ancestor was a celestial king. She is cultivating the 9 deaths heaven art. Ordinarily, a cultivation technique that is called a heaven art would be the technique of a celestial king. Small Tower suddenly voiced out. Ling Han was shocked. He had not thought that this guy would suddenly pipe up. You don't know the hierarchy of elites in the celestial realm, yet actually recognize the 9 deaths heaven art? A living person is right in front of me, and I still can't tell? Do you think I am as stupid as a pig like you? Small Tower retorted coldly. The Empress was also furious, and rebuked Small Tower, do not insult my husband. Small Tower was completely indifferent. It was just a tool spirit, so how could it possibly take note of the beauty or ugliness of humans? The Empress's charms had completely zero effect on it. Ling Han also knew Small Tower had a sharp tongue, but did not mind much. Otherwise, he would have long since died of fury from this guy's venom. He asked, going by that logic, I am cultivating the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, so is that also a Celestial King's technique? TSK, who told you that a Heaven's Scroll and Heaven Art are the same? Small Tower's disdain was even clearer. The indestructible Heaven's Scroll is a supreme cultivation technique that the Heavenly Venerable Tier has created from studying the techniques of a good many Celestial Kings, combined with his own comprehension. You can just laugh at your own good fortune. Combined the techniques of Celestial Kings, the highest level of accomplishment, and improved even further. Ling Han was amused, and said, then wouldn't I become even more awesome than the Celestial King in future? A technique is only a technique, whether one can reach the highest level depends on the individual, Small Tower said. These words were reasonable, but the next few words revealed its true nature. In my opinion, It would be very difficult for you to reach Celestial King tier. Bah. Ling Han gave it the middle finger. Just because of your words, not only will I become a Celestial King, I will also become one that surpasses other Celestial Kings. I'll be waiting, Small Tower said calmly, and then slowly disappeared. The Empress had a strange expression. Why do I feel that it is trying to spur you on? Even if it is spurring me on, I am also determined to surpass Celestial King. This guy is too despicable. There will come a day that I will toss it into the toilet, Ling Han uttered in displeasure. Of course, this was an empty threat. If he really tossed the Black Tower into the toilet, how was he supposed to use it again in future? The Empress merely smiled gently, and placed a hand on Ling Han's arm. The two of them exited the Black Tower together. It was still the underground treasure trove, and the massive paw was still stabbing into it, exuding a cold sharpness. The two of them carefully left. The Empress was slightly strained, but with the brick in her hold, she managed to carry on. They looked down from the summit. There were a total of 14 peaks here, and there was a palace atop each peak. Going by that deduction, the remaining 13 palaces should be the quarters of the Open Cloud's king and the 12 generals, respectively. Come, let's do a sweep. Ling Han was filled with confidence. He now had the decree of a Saint King, as well as a drop of blood essence from a Saint King, so he was very sure of himself. Naturally, there was no need to use the blood essence of a Saint King to deal with a few eternal river tears. That thing was a consumable item, and definitely should be used to deal with more powerful enemies. Thus, he would take out that Saint King's decree at most. In any case, its might had mostly decreased. He wasn't very far away from this level of battle prowess himself, so even if he used it, it would not be too much of a waste. They ascended a mountain peak. The steps here were also laid out by godly metal, but they were not level 16. Instead, they were level 15. This should be the Open Cloud's King's peak, and was slightly inferior to the main peak. Take them. Ling Han was not reserved at all, prying all of them all the way to the summit. In the meantime, Hu Kan and his group also saw that they had left the main peak, yet actually did not come over to pick a fight with them. That's right. They are in no rush to make a move, because they are deliberately waiting for us to gather the treasures. Then, they will take us down, and these treasures would naturally belong to them, which would save them both the effort and energy. Ling Han soon deduced. He exchanged a look with the Empress, and both of them broke out into smiles. It was still undecided who would be the one doing the robbing. Then we will not be in a rush to make our move, either. Ling Han saw that Hu Kan and his group were also digging out steps, and they still dared to call him country bumpkin. TSK. They dug the steps all the way to the peak. There was another palace here, but there weren't many treasures here. Ling Han only found a brocade. This was a valuable item. It was woven from level 17 silk combined with godly metal. Not only was it incredibly tough and durable, it also had a very good effect of removing force. Durability and removing force were different. If it was merely durable, such as clothing, then when a sword stabbed it, it indeed could not penetrate it. However, the force of the attack would still be transmitted, and could still cause damage. But if there was the effect of removing force, things would be different. It would be equivalent to channeling one's origin power to cancel out the attack, so the impact would be further decreased. If one included formations and martial intent along with, it could be made into a treasured robe. Actually, these brocades were bed curtains. The Open Cloud's king was disdainful of using such saintly material as his armor. Wife, these can probably be made into quite a few suits, right? Hehe, we're rich. Ling Han laughed loudly. The Empress gave it some thought, and replied, actually, it can't make that many suits. Making a treasured robe would expend a lot of materials. We'll just make as many as we can. Ling Han also knew that he had already gained a lot of profit. Too bad, this palace was not constructed from saintly material, but made of level 16 materials. The problem was that it was too firm. Ling Han couldn't break it apart at all. At this time, he actually should thank that paw. If it were not for the fact that it had pierced through the main hall, Ling Han would not have been able to gather the green origin jade, What more, discover the treasure trove hidden underground. They switched to another peak. The steps here were more inferior, and were laid out with level 14 godly metal. Obviously, this was the peak of one of the 12 generals. The remaining 11 peaks would probably be of the same standard. Both parties were making a big sweep, and in the end, Ling Han and Empress Luanxing swept 5 peaks, while Hu Kan and his group swept 9 peaks. After all, they had more numbers in their group, and aside from the main peak, the other peaks did not have such frightening mountain winds. Finally, both sides met at the foot of the 6th peak. Chapter 15:14 Second Encounter. Chapter 15:14 Second Encounter. Hu Kan and his group were once again calm and unruffled. There was no hindering by the mountain winds here, so they could use their full strength. In that case, how easy would it be to suppress Ling Han and Empress Luanxing? They were merely easy prey. Fairy, why do you have to follow this kind of trash? Just join our 8 stones forbidden land, Hu Kan said to Empress Luanxing. Ordinarily, it was extremely difficult to enter into a certain forbidden land. To maintain the purity of the bloodline of their 8 stones tribe, they only chose their spouses from within the clan. As long as they weren't actual siblings, marriage was possible among cousins. But with how astonishingly beautiful Empress Luanxing was, he naturally had to put all his efforts to strive for her. Worse come to worst, they could choose not to have children. These words were said right in front of Ling Han. Actually, he was deliberately delivering a blow against Ling Han. Who asked them to experience so many losses previously? If he didn't deliver a few blows to this person, it truly would not be enough to vent his ire. Empress Luanxing didn't even look at Hu Kan. Wasn't that mere nonsense coming from a fool? She didn't even want to bother with him. Ugly people would do all kinds of things to get attention. This was the Empress's style of contempt, causing Hu Kan and the other men to feel displeased internally. Let me beat him to death. Hu Bing was the first to jump out. He had always felt defiant, thinking that the only reason he had not been a match for Ling Han previously was due to the mountain winds. Yet Hu Kan stretched out an arm and pulled him back. He shook his head. Hu Bing was definitely not a match for this brat. It was very simple. He had used half of his power, and was still unable to take Ling Han down. Was Hu Bing half as strong as he was? What a joke, he was not even as strong as a 10,000th of him. They had already lost 3 consecutive rounds. How could they continue to seek their own humiliation? Brother Kan. Hu Bing was defiant. He was a prodigy that had walked out from a forbidden land. What person of the same cultivation level in the immortal realm could put up a fight against him? Hu Kan shot a glare at him, and Hu Bing immediately dared not say anything else. How should I address you? Hu Kan asked. Ling Han quirked his lips in a grin, and replied, you guys want to kill me, so I don't have to be reserved, either, and will just kill you all. Hence, you all will soon become a pile of corpses. What use is there for you to know my name? So arrogant. Hu Kan smirked coldly. This was a battle of 7 against 2, and they had the advantage in numbers. Furthermore, Ling Han and Empress Luanxing were both only in the low extreme. The gap in cultivation level was like the gap between heaven and earth. Where did you get all this confidence from? Whether I'm arrogant or not, you will only know the answer after a battle. Ling Han's fists trembled. Charge. Hu Kan shot out. Channeling the 8 stones body art, his body turned into a massive rock figure that could not be harmed by any weapon or affected by any technique. As he had attained the 2nd level of the 8 stones technique, he should be invincible among his peers in the Eternal River tier. Unless his foe was in the pinnacle level, they would not be able to hurt him. If it was not because there was power of regulation of Genesis tier in the mountain winds, how could he have lost to them? Ling Han drew out the broken wooden sword. Before the grade of the divine demon sword was raised, it was still the broken wooden sword that was more useful. Otherwise, if he used the divine demon sword against an elite in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier, it would definitely shatter with a single strike. Before he entered into the celestial realm, the might of the broken wooden sword was actually not inferior to the divine demon swords. One after another, demonic patterns appeared, and a frightening killing intent surged forth. Saint Tool. Hukan became apprehensive, and then shook his head. Demonic tool. A look of envy appeared on his face, even he did not have a corresponding saint tool. Even though the Forbidden Lands had astonishing wealth, there was a large number of them. They had expanded too much because they had come with their whole families. Just look at the Stone Emperor. He was the only child of his old man, so whatever treasures were definitely going to be left to him. Thus, the Stone Emperor could ride a saint-level chariot, and he also had armor made of saintly material that was not inferior in any respect. As for the Forbidden Lands, 7 prodigies that were not inferior to the Stone Emperor in any way had so easily appeared, but did the Forbidden Land really have so many saint tools? They had not obtained the inheritance of a celestial king. They had to have saint tools, and perhaps there were a good many too, but the number definitely did not reach the extent where all the juniors could each possess one. Hukan was naturally jealous. He was also filled with a strong wariness. That was a saint tool. It was nothing to joke about if he was hit even once with it. Furthermore, Ling Han was not an ordinary low-extreme cultivator, either. His battle prowess could even match half of his strength, and added with a demonic tool, that was like doubling his power. His expression was very solemn. Drawing out the distance from Ling Han, they exchanged blows. Ling Han waved the sword to parry the incoming attacks. His strength was much too inferior to Hukan's. Even if he used the 10 formations at the same time, he was still far from becoming a match for him. Thankfully, he had Tide of the Ages that could largely dispense most of the attacks, and added with his frightening physique, the damage that Hukan could deliver to him was extremely limited. Even if he was wounded, it would also be instant recovery with his recovery abilities, so it did no harm. Hukan finally let go of his pride, and declared, "Let's attack together and kill this man." Ling Han already knew the secret behind the Heavenly River King's treasures, so he definitely had to be killed. Hu Bing and the other 2 men immediately leaped out, ganging up on him without any hesitation. Hu Shuyu and the other women, though, targeted Empress Luan Xing, and surrounded her in a well-coordinated movement. In the eyes of Hukan and his group, the Empress was an unmatchable treasure, but in the eyes of Hu Shuyu and the other women, the Empress was a thorn in their side that had to be removed at all costs. Otherwise, the jealousy would drive them crazy. Just the thought that there was actually such a perfect woman in this world made their hearts clench. The Empress was fearless, and drew out the brick. Both sides erupted in battle. Whether it was Ling Han or Empress Luan Xing, they were both at a disadvantage. The gap in numbers and cultivation level was too large, and the only reason why they managed to continue fighting was because one of them had a strong physique, while the other had the aid of the absolute beginning stone. If it was another person, they would have long since died over a few hundred times. But going on like this was not a good thing. Ling Han was still fine, but the Empress could only depend on the absolute beginning stone, after all. If she exhausted all her origin power, it would be dangerous. A ferocious light appeared in Ling Han's eyes, and he declared, "Since you all are so determined to seek death, you cannot blame others for it." He endured a few heavy blows, and rushed to the side of Empress Luan Xing. He drew her into the Black Tower, and then took out the Saint's Decree. Without a second thought, he opened it directly. Boom, all of a sudden, a terrifying pressure seeped out, and boundless golden light appeared in waves. "Oh no, it's a Saint's Decree." Hukan's expression changed drastically. "Ian, the might seems to be very weak." Hu Shuyu suddenly realized that something was off with it. "This is the decree of a saint, but too much time has passed, so its initial might is no longer present. He must have gotten this in the main palace. We'll work together, and it would be fine if we endure for a while. The majority of power has already seeped out from the saint's decree." Right. The 7 of them combined forces. At this time, the decree had already exploded with a frightening killing intent, blasting towards them. It did not even need Ling Han to actively control it. The decree would attack all other parties aside from its holder. This was also the weakness of a decree, as it did not differentiate between allies and fees. If one wanted to make it so that the might of a decree could be controlled, there was a need to spend even more effort and time to forge it. At the time, it was obvious that it was impossible for the Heavenly River King to do that. Not good, though the power inside this decree is weak, Why is the power of regulation so frightening? Hu Jing exclaimed in shock. It had only been a short while, and she was already covered with wounds. The situation was approaching a crisis. Are we really going to die here? I have no wish to die, the 7 of them exclaimed. They were filled with even more regret. If they had known that this trip would be so dangerous, they would have begged for a decree from their senior clansman at all costs. Even if it was not written by a saint king, it was fine as long as it had reached saint level. But if they really had had a saint's decree, Ling Han would have simply drawn out that drop of blood essence. Bring it on. Chapter 15:15 Total Annihilation. Chapter 15:15 Total Annihilation. When a saint's decree showed its might, all of Hu Kan's group were covered with wounds. They had completely no way to withstand it. When they finally managed to last until the power of the decree had passed, all of them were severely wounded. Though none of them had died, their vitality was greatly damaged, and their strength had also dropped to rock bottom. Sword in hand, Ling Han charged out without any hesitation. He had been polite, but they did not want to accept his kindness. Not only did they want to kill him, they dared to have designs on his wife, the Empress. He naturally could not spare them. Cripple them. Kill them. Eliminate them. Fuck, did they think that they were the only ones who could show their might from their haughty positions? Did they think he didn't have a temper? The sword swept past, and blood sprayed out. Having tasted human blood, the broken wooden sword became even more hideous. Black demonic chi surged out from the sword's blade and rushed around Ling Han, making it seem as if he had transformed into a great demon of the netherworld. Pu. Hu Bing was weakest, and also became the fastest to die. The sword swept past, and blood spurted into the skies. His head also dropped onto the ground, a disbelieving expression still present on his face. He was a prodigy of the Forbidden Land. With such a powerful force backing him, someone actually still dared to kill him. With his head severed by the broken wooden sword, it naturally meant instant death. How dare you? The eyes of Hu Kan and the others all became bloodshot. No matter how much they had been at a disadvantage previously, they were still filled with a deep pride. Coming from a forbidden land, they looked down on all others in the immortal realm. That was because they thought they belonged to the celestial realm, so how could trash from this realm compare to them? But with the death of Hu Bing, their hearts throbbed violently. That pride and inbred arrogance was completely erased. They had become afraid. This demon really dared to make a move on them. Even the Forbidden Land couldn't scare him off. We are people from the 8 Stones Forbidden Land, and have a total of 3 ancestors. They are all saint kings, and the saints in our Forbidden Land number by the hundreds. You dare make a move on us, your fate will be to die a tragic death. Hu Kan and his group threw out the 8 Stones Forbidden Land. Now, this was their last hope that could save them. Ling Han only acted as if he had not heard them. Since he was already filled with killing intent, there was no possible way for him to stop. No matter whom they threw out, it would not be enough to scare him off. Kill, kill, kill. One after another, heads flew. One after another, they collapsed, and very soon, the only ones remaining alive were Hu Kan and Hu Shuyu. Run. Hu Kan called out to Hu Shuyu. Hu Shuyu nodded. Previously, they had kept fighting because they had been held back by Hu Bing and the others. How could they leave these people behind and flee for their own lives? But the present situation was different. The others had all died, so there was no significance in continuing to fight to the death. Furthermore, if all of them died here, that would be a pointless death. How were they going to avenge themselves? One should know that their ancestor had concealed the twists of fate, and it would last for about a year's time at least. Thus, even if their ancestor did another fortune-telling on the spur of the moment, that would be a matter of a year later. Where would he go to hunt down their murderer? Their ancestor was only a saint king, and not an omnipotent celestial king. The two of them immediately fled in 2 separate directions. As long as one of them managed to escape alive and enter into the starship outside, the starship's defense was naturally not something that Ling Han could penetrate. Ling Han pursued. Now, these 2 people had sustained serious injuries, their battle prowess dropped greatly. If he didn't take this chance to kill them, then when they had recovered from their injuries, he would have to use the blood essence of the Saint King if he still wanted to kill them. That was too much of a waste. Annihilating Dragon Star Arrow. Ling Han used this divine technique. Xiao, his origin power became a streak of light that chased quickly on the heels of Hu Shuyu. This archery technique had fused with the tide of the ages and the blood crow formation. It was visible that when the streak of light flew out, it became a divine blood crow. As its wings flapped, its speed was further boosted. What? Because Hu Kan was no longer the target of attack, he had the energy to turn around and look. He couldn't help but look stunned. The annihilating Dragon Star Arrow. You are a survivor of the Heavenly River King's force. The annihilating Dragon Star Arrow was the ultimate technique of one of the 12 generals. At the time, it had killed a considerable number of great saints, and had even posed a considerable threat to the Saint Kings. Because of this, even if Hu Kan had not seen it himself, he had still occasionally heard about it from his seniors, so he remembered it clearly. Thus, he recognized it with a single look. However, as for why the annihilating Dragon Star Arrow would become a blood crow at the end, he could not provide an explanation for it. But this did not hinder the might of this strike. It had even far surpassed his understanding. The blood crow caught up to Hu Shuyu with only a flap of its wings and sank into her heart. A spray of blood spurted out, and she collapsed loudly on the ground. Ordinarily, immortals were very, very difficult to kill. Even if their physical bodies were completely destroyed, as long as their spirit had not been damaged, they could still find an empty shell and come back to life. However, Ling Han's attack had even blended in the 9 heavens flame. With an immortal flame in her body, could she still manage to stay alive? Hu Kan's whole body was covered with cold sweat. Hurriedly, he turned around and fled. By now, he had lost all his fighting spirit, and merely wanted to leave this place as soon as possible. Then, he could ask one of the great elites of the Forbidden Land to move out and hunt Ling Han to the corners of this world. None of you can escape. Ling Han shot out another arrow. This time, he had used the ultimate arrow. A streak of light swept out, and Hu Kan's body suddenly flew, drawing out an arc in midair, and collapsing heavily onto the ground. Blood poured out beneath him, his eyes wide and filled with fury and defiance. He was a prodigy of this generation, and actually died in such a stupid manner. How could he possibly rest in peace? Ling Han though shook his head. Hu Kan should be inferior to big shots like Ren Feiyun and the others. He had seen a battle between the 3 great big shots, and they were at least a whole level stronger than Hu Kan. He picked out the spatial spirit tools of the 7 people, and moved all the things inside into the Black Tower. He obtained another great amount of high-level godly metal. This trip was really worth it. As long as the Divine Demon Sword can be improved to level 14, it can rush up to level 17 in a single go, and become a saint tool. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. Previously, he had not placed any importance on this treasure trove at all, and had merely wanted to set up a trap for Jiyu Daoyi. I can't forget my proper business. Ling Han immediately began planning. How should he allow the news about the Heavenly River King's treasure trove appearing to leak out such that it would seem normal? Jiyu Daoyi was no idiot. Having been able to become a severing mundane ancestor, he definitely had to be astute and circumspect. What Ling Han was betting on was the fact that he was presently a reincarnated body, and did not have the calm nature that he had once had. Furthermore, he definitely wanted to return to the celestial realm urgently. Otherwise, he could have worked hard on cultivation on his own. What was the point of his entering into the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy in that case? Let's go out and take a look. Who knows how Fonga is now? The 2 of them exited the chest, and saw that a dead silence had fallen on this corner of the galaxy. The corpses of the 3 Phoenix Kings were no longer shining, but they were still tightly embracing each other, and did not leak out even a bit of light. Going by the situation now, it won't end anytime soon. Ling Han recalled how the Rain Emperor had obtained the inheritance of an Eternal River tier elite, and had spent at least 20 years to fully digest the benefits he had gained. And that was just an Eternal River tier. Now they were dealing with Saint Kings. This is good too. With these 3 Phoenix Kings here, it would be more convincing. Furthermore, as long as a Saint King has not appeared, no one can possibly hurt Feng'er. Ling Han thought about it for a moment, and tied this chariot to the cloud-piercing shuttle. Pulling the corpses of the 3 Phoenix Kings behind him, they headed back to the wood figure planet. Of course, they had to drag it closer. Otherwise, how long would Jiu Daoyi have to spend on this trip? He did not have the cloud-piercing shuttle. The cloud-piercing shuttle reversed its original course, and took merely over a dozen days, which soon passed. Ling Han pulled the chariot to a barren planet, and then blasted a massive hold, making it so it seemed as if this chariot had just burst out of the ground. As for the details, he was uncaring. Were the corpses of 3 Phoenix Kings not convincing enough? He quietly returned to the academy, and began to use saintly medicine to cook a soup. Chapter 1516 Ingesting Saint Pill. Chapter 1516 Ingesting Saint Pill. Ling Han had obtained some saintly medicine, but at his present cultivation level, he was still not qualified to refine it into alchemical pills yet. Thus, he decided to settle for the next best thing. He would not refine it into alchemical pills. Instead, he directly extracted the divine essence from within through heating. The effects from this were definitely inferior to an alchemical pill. There would definitely be a certain amount of wastage, but Ling Han merely wanted to improve his abilities as soon as possible, so he did not bother about it. If he cooked this outside, this would lead to too much commotion. The divine essence of the saintly medicine was not something that Ling Han could conceal. If he actually drew the attention of the saints, should he share with them or not? Thus, he concocted everything within the Black Tower, planning to silently reap the benefits. Furthermore, it was much more efficient to concoct inside this place. There was no need for him to worry about his cultivation level lacking, causing his loss of control over the situation. In merely 3 days, the saintly medicine had been cooked into a soup. Ling Han had long since told Zhou Yao to inform the others. The Rain Emperor, Ding Ping, the Notionless Saint, and the others entered into the Black Tower to enjoy this rare saintly medicine soup. This was an extremely nutritious item, but everyone's cultivation level was too low, especially of those aside from Ling Han and Empress Luanxing. None of the others had entered into the Eternal River tier, so they could only drink a little soup, and could not touch the saintly medicine at all. If they actually consumed it, they would definitely explode from the frightening medicinal effects. Even so, their whole bodies were still glowing with divine light. Opening their mouths, they actually spat out red clouds. The medicinal effects of the saintly medicine were too shocking. Even if they had only drunk a little soup, it was still a supremely precious treasure. Even they ended up like this, what more Ling Han and Empress Luanxing? Ling Han was still fine, but the Empress's cheeks were dyed a rosy hue due to the medicinal effects, presenting an indescribably exquisite sight. Ding Ping, Zhou Yao, and the others couldn't help but turn their heads away, not daring to look at her. Without another word, everyone hurriedly ran over to the reincarnation tree to digest the medicinal effects. Not only would saintly medicine increase one's accumulation of origin power, there was also the regulations of great Tao contained within. However, whether one could digest the benefits of it would depend on the comprehension ability of the individual. Underneath the reincarnation tree, 1 day was equivalent to a whole year. This naturally could allow the medicinal effects of the saintly medicine to be maximized. Ling Han's whole body was glowing with light. His physique was the most freakish. He had consumed at least 3/4 of that saintly medicine. Though a lot of its medicinal effects had been extracted into the soup, the majority was definitely still contained in the stalk of saintly medicine itself. Like a drunk, he was unsteady on his footing. The Black Tower could suppress all external forces, but if he was the one who bloated himself, then even the Black Tower had no way to solve that problem. Everyone fell into a seat, forming a circle around the reincarnation tree, and entering into a meditative state. Ling Han also channeled his technique, absorbing the effects of the saintly medicine. His accumulation of origin power was also soaring up with his absorption. A whole 11 days had passed, and he ended his isolation. I have advanced from the early stage of the low extreme into the middle stage. Ling Han appeared to be excited. After entering into the eternal river tier, every step would take hundreds of thousands to millions of years to accomplish. This was also because the eternal river tier was too strong. If one wanted to progress further than all the rest, it would naturally require a very long time. Even if Ling Han was the alchemy emperor, and could endlessly concoct suitable alchemical pills, he still had to take thousands and thousands of years if he wanted to take a step further. He had now taken one step with only 11 days' time. The speed was already nature-defying enough. Too bad it is saintly medicine. We only obtained a total of 3 stalks. Ling Han sighed. The number the Heavenly River King had obtained should not be just this amount, he probably ingested the rest. Sigh, since you want me to avenge you, why didn't you leave a few more behind for me? There were a total of 3 stalks of saintly medicine, which was barely enough to send him up to the medium extreme. If I want to quickly increase my cultivation level, I will have to depend on saintly medicine, but saintly medicine is not like cabbages that can be found easily. Ling Han shook his head. It would be great if I could get the seeds of some saintly medicine. I could plant them in the Black Tower, and I would be able to harvest a great amount in the future. That may not be the case. Small Tower suddenly appeared. It was more unpredictable than anyone else in the Black Tower. When the reincarnation tree bears fruit, one would be able to grant you a complete change. Ling Han's eyes lit up. The reincarnation tree was not saintly medicine, but was a supreme treasured tree even in the celestial realm. He hurriedly asked, how long will it take to bear fruit? At least a few 100 million years, Small Tower estimated. You. Just scram. Ling Han exclaimed helplessly. This damn guy was really just planning to screw him over. However, Small Tower's tone suddenly changed. If you can manage to unlock another floor of the Black Tower, I will be able to possess more power, and can shrink this time many times over. Ling Han was cheered up again. If Small Tower said that it was many times over, then that definitely did not mean 10 times or 100 times, but a few thousand, tens of thousand, or a few million times over. However, Small Tower made another turnaround. Ling Han couldn't help but complain, can't you speak nicely? Don't listen if you don't want to. Small Tower was acting proud again. Turning around, it was about to leave. Hold on, finish your word. Ling Han quickly called out. Small Tower finally continued, because this is growth through a catalyst, and the Black Tower ultimately cannot simulate the regulations of the reincarnation tree, the effects of the reincarnation tree cannot reach their maximum. In fact, it is not even a billionth of it. Though Ling Han felt it was a pity, if he really allowed the reincarnation tree to grow freely in the outside world, that would need 12 trillion years. Who could afford to wait that long? It was good enough that it could be used. Then I'll be waiting. Ling Han nodded. Now, even a stalk of saintly medicine was enough to further boost his cultivation level by a star. Then, what about after he became a saint? The effects of the saintly medicine would be even further decreased. More importantly, how could there be so much saintly medicine in this world? It was not a bad idea to rob the Forbidden Lands. These forces had originated from the celestial realm, and they themselves had astronomical wealth. Added with the fact that they had existed for so many years, they should have cultivated a considerable number of generations of saintly medicine. Every forbidden land should have 1 or 2 stalks at least. Ling Han suppressed the temptation in his heart. If he went to the Forbidden Lands now, that would definitely be seeking death. At present, his most important business was Jiyu Daoyi. He would snatch away the latter's divine fetus to help his empress wife to achieve success, and advance into the shattering void tier as soon as possible. His days of happiness were right around the corner. After exiting the Black Tower, he merely walked around outside, and he already heard people talking about a strange and powerful demonic beast pulling a chariot everywhere he went. The 3 Phoenix Kings were now wrapped around each other, and had also withdrawn their divine flame. Their saintly might was diffused, and what kind of creature it was could not be distinguished from a mere look. They would only think that it was a divine beast that had never been seen before. But a powerful divine beast was pulling a chariot, which had a chest on it. This was both strange and mysterious. This was the most suitable topic for gossip in their leisure time. Hey, 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 did you hear? On a barren star, an ancient chariot has appeared. There is a chest on it, but no one can open it. Who hasn't heard of it by now? An incredibly powerful demonic beast is pulling the chariot, and no one can recognize it. Everyone is deducing that that ancient star must have once had a glorious martial arts civilization, but it was destroyed by an ultra-huge battle. There must be supreme rare treasures hidden within the chest. That's right. Now, more and more of our senior brothers and senior sisters have rushed there, wanting to get hold of the rare treasures in the chest. It is said that there are ancient words on the chest, saying that the scriptures of a celestial king are hidden within. Scriptures of a celestial king. What is that? I don't know, either, but it sounds very impressive. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,